I am a 28-year-old female, and my husband's 26 years old. We have been married for almost 5 years, and we have 3 kids. We have a very good relationship and talk about everything. If we fight twice a year, that's a lot, and it's rarely about anything serious. Oftentimes, it was because of a misunderstanding, and we know to go and check with each other once things have cooled down and resolve things. We also have a good division of labor, in my opinion. He is currently the only breadwinner, though I am looking for a job. I let him deal with budgeting, lawyers, insurance, and all that kind of thing because I'm honestly just not good at it. But everything is still discussed with me in detail, and we come to agreements together. I would say, 60% of the childcare stuff, just because I'm home more often. But he parents with me whenever he is available. I do most of the cooking, but that is because I'm very protective of my kitchen and like knowing what ingredients we have available so I can properly meal plan every month. He does cook once a week when I am tired. We have a cleaner who comes once a week to help with washing and dishes because we both struggle with it and decided it's not worth the stress. All this to say, I am extremely happy in my marriage at the moment, and I don't at all feel like a battered woman or like I'm being treated like a slave or anything like that. Which brings me to the actual problem, which is my mom. Now, my mom grew up in a hurtful household, which has turned her into an extremely controlling and judgmental person. I had a lot of issues with her when I lived at home, but after a lot of work and a lot of boundaries, we have a better relationship now. She has been very hot and cold with my husband since we met, saying how nice he is and how glad she is. I am happy one day, but pointing out a bunch of supposed red flags and telling me I'm being abused, but I'm just not noticing the next day. There was even an incident early on in our relationship where my husband's mom was rude to me, then told him a bunch of lies about me saying I was horrible to her, which made him annoyed with me. And my mom insisted that his response was hurtful because he didn't listen, which made me annoyed at him. This was the biggest fight we have had to this point. And once we spoke to each other, we realized our moms were pitting us against each other and that we would ignore them from then on. Things were fine for a long time, but then I got pregnant, and suddenly, to my mom, everything my husband did was wrong. He was not helping me enough, not talking nicely enough to me, and not being gentle enough when grabbing my hand or shoulders. When I gave birth, there was an emergency, and I ended up in a government hospital without a phone in the middle of infection. 19 lockdown, so he wasn't allowed in with me. When I got out the next morning, he held me in his arms and cried and held our baby and told her how beautiful she was. And my mom told me he had been sitting at their house all evening crying because he felt helpless and he hadn't slept a wink. This earned him her respect. And once again, for a few years, she started treating him well, asking him to help with stuff around the house, cooking his favorite meals, getting him nice birthday gifts, treating him basically the same as she treats my brother, her own son. This year started out stressful because I developed epilepsy, and this has caused a strain on me, but my husband has been my rock in all of this. Sitting with me at the hospital, dealing with all the hospital paperwork, and rushing home from work every time I have a seizure, holding me and calming me down when I'm feeling super overwhelmed, making sure I take my meds every day. Our marriage has been the best it's ever been. We have been lovey-dovey, having deep convos, have a great intimate life, and even joke about being on the same wavelength right now, because we say the same thing at the same time on the daily and then jinx it and laugh. I almost feel like I have fallen in love all over again, even though I never fell out of it. I even bragged about it to my mom, telling her things are going great between us. She just told us we will have one fight and be out of sync again, which put a damper on my mood that day. By the way, we did have a spat, but we are still doing great. Since I said that though, she has started with her old nonsense again, saying every little thing he does is abuse or disrespectful to me, and constantly making snide remarks about him. A few examples where this happened are him asking me to make him some coffee, which my parents do too all the time when we visit. My mom said he should be doing that for you, to which I told her, he does it all the time. You just aren't there every time he does stuff for me. Where I asked him to change a diaper, but he said, sorry babe, I can't right now, because he was busy with our oldest kid. My mom then told me I shouldn't let him talk to me that way, to which I was like, What way? He wasn't rude. He was just busy. Last weekend, he was helping me carry my stuff to the car, and his arms were well and truly stuffed. So he asked me if I wouldn't mind helping him find his other flip-flop while he took the stuff outside. I agreed and started looking under the couch. My mom asked me why I'm doing that kind of stuff for him, that he's walking all over me, and I should let him find his own shoe. I told her, his hands are full doing something nice for me. What's so wrong with me helping him out when he needs help? She didn't say anything and just grunted and walked away. Later in the car, it had me thinking, do my parents not do things for each other? Is it not normal for couples to do things for each other? Didn't think it was weird, and I have never felt forced to do anything. And I would hope my husband doesn't feel forced when I ask him favors. I can't help but feel like my mom is trying to stir up drama in my marriage. That or she doesn't know what a healthy marriage looks like and is seeing wolves behind every bush. Or am I really being blinded and gaslit into ignoring problems? I really don't know. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I even bragged about it to my mom, telling her things are going great between us. I think this is very much not a case of a completely resolved relationship with your mom, because you're not clear that this is the sort of thing that you should never talk to her about. I'm glad you've done some work and identified her as someone where you always need to keep your guard up and enforce boundaries. But in reality, you're not doing it. And what's worse, her opinion still carries a lot of weight with you. Hence your need to make this thread instead of completely ignoring her. She needs to go on an information diet. She should never be told anything even remotely important or intimate. If she asks, you need to be a gray rock and answer, oh fine, thanks, ad infinitum. And when she gets into your relationship and tries to say bad things about your husband, you need to not mince words. I didn't ask you for your opinion, mother. Please shut up about it, or I'll need to leave. And then do so if she carries on. Let your husband know this is going on and how you'll act, so he knows not to try and calm things down when he comes into the kitchen one day, and you tell him, honey, my mother is saying bad things about you again. Let's grab our stuff and leave. Repeat ad museum and things are bound to get better, but probably she will never respect you enough or be able to act like a normal human being towards you. And that's the point. Or maybe today, when you'll need to decide whether having your mother in your life and your kids growing around such a toxic influence and learning how she treats people is seemingly okay, is something still worth it to you? Comment 2. Your mom isn't having a go at your husband. She's having a go at you. That's her primary agenda. She's basically saying to you, don't let that man tread all over you. I'll hazard a guess that she's speaking from experience, or at least perceived experience, and she's projecting onto you by telling you not to do what happened to her. As far as you're concerned, there is no such thing happening, but she thinks you've been conditioned to accept this abuse. The only thing you can do is to recognize where she's probably coming from and tell her in no uncertain terms that you aren't going to tolerate shoot from any man, never mind your husband. If you can get a job, it will help to demonstrate your independence, but that is for your benefit, not your mom's. Now, for the update. Thanks for reading my last post. So, this past week has been pretty up and down, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened. It all started when my mom decided to drop by unannounced last Monday. She claimed she was just in the neighborhood, but I could tell she was looking for something to criticize. My husband was at work, and the kids were at school, so it was just the two of us. She started off with small talk, but it quickly turned into her usual nitpicking about my husband. She said he was too controlling, and that I was letting him walk all over me. I tried to brush it off, but it was clear she wasn't going to let it go. Later that evening, when my husband got home, I told him about my mom's visit. He sighed and said he was tired of her constant meddling. We decided to have a family meeting with my mom to set some boundaries once and for all. We called her over the next day and sat her down. My husband calmly explained that while we appreciated her concern, her constant criticism was putting a strain on our relationship. My mom didn't take it well. She accused him of trying to isolate me from my family and said she was only trying to protect me. The conversation ended with her storming out of the house, saying she needed some time to think. The next few days were tense. My mom didn't call or text, and I was left feeling torn between my husband and my mom. On Thursday, my mom finally reached out. She asked if we could meet for coffee to talk things over. I agreed, hoping that we could find some common ground. When we met, she seemed calmer, but still insisted that my husband was manipulating me. She brought up the incident with the flip-flop again, saying it was a clear sign of his controlling behavior. I tried to explain that it was just a small favor and that we both do things for each other all the time, but she wouldn't listen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if there was any truth to what my mom was saying. I decided to talk to my husband about it the next morning. He listened patiently and reassured me that our relationship was built on mutual respect and love. He reminded me of all the times we've supported each other through tough times, like when I developed epilepsy, and he was there for me every step of the way. His words gave me some comfort, but I still couldn't shake the doubt my mom had planted in my mind. On Saturday, things took an unexpected turn. My mom showed up at our house again, this time with my dad. They said they wanted to have a serious talk with both of us. We all sat down in the living room, and my mom started by saying she was worried about my well-being. She said she had been doing some research and believed my husband was exhibiting signs of emotional abuse. My dad, who usually stays out of these things, chimed in and said he agreed with her. They both urged me to consider leaving my husband for my own safety. I was stunned. I looked at my husband, who was visibly hurt but trying to stay composed. He asked my parents to give us some privacy so we could talk things over. Once they left, we had a long, emotional conversation. My husband said he felt like he was being unfairly judged and that he was tired of constantly having to prove himself to my mom. He asked me if I truly believed he was hurtful. I told him I didn't, but I was confused and didn't know what to think anymore. The next day, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. As I walked through the park, I thought about my childhood and my mom's controlling nature. I remembered how she used to criticize every little thing I did and how it made me feel like I could never do anything right. I realized that her behavior was a pattern and that she was projecting her own issues onto my marriage. This realization gave me some clarity, but it also made me sad. I didn't want to cut my mom out of my life, but I also couldn't let her ruin my marriage. When I got home, I sat down with my husband and told him about my walk and the thoughts I had. He hugged me and said he was proud of me for standing up for our relationship. We decided to set some firm boundaries with my mom and to seek couples therapy to help us navigate this difficult situation. We also agreed to limit our interactions with my mom for a while to give us some space to heal. As the week came to an end, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I knew we had made the right decision, but it was hard to accept that my relationship with my mom might never be the same. I also felt a renewed sense of gratitude for my husband and the strong bond we share. Despite the challenges, we were committed to making our marriage work and supporting each other through thick and thin. Thanks for reading. Aita for cutting off my narcissistic mother. After suggesting therapy and medication, this requires a little bit of background to better understand the situation, but I'm genuinely feeling stuck in this and would love if someone could share their thoughts, hear me out, or even discuss this with me altogether, although I highly appreciate the comments, replies as well. So, for the second part of my life, my relationship with my mom is becoming increasingly difficult. She's in a bad situation. She has been living alone for over 10 to 20 years already. Almost no family members are still in contact with her, except for me and my brother. The way that she is and how she interacts with people, at least with our family, it was just too much for basically all of us. Described traits from our interactions with her: narcissism, pessimism, negativity, lack of willpower or desire to make things better by putting her own effort into turning her life around. Other people being the worst and conspiring against her according to her, basically, from my understanding. Inadequate, delusional thinking, and probably more, but these are often significant traits that show up. Also, very strong beliefs about what is true and how life is. Since I'm her son, according to her, I almost owe her, being her emotional sponge, hearing her out because she has it bad, helping her out, and that my behavior towards her is not normal. What she's referring to, me being cold, distant, and not supportive of her. Reason for that? So much of my experience with her was straight up negative, super negative. I would constantly be sad, angry, frustrated, or wouldn't even know who to trust after talking to her in my late teenage years. A lot of talks about how we don't care about her, how she's trash and nobody needs her, how it'd be better if she'd unalive herself and whatnot. It hurts my heart because I care about her, but I just got so conditioned to basically associate her with negativity, negative experiences, and outcomes. So much so that I no longer want to be in contact. I'd rather be away. But at the same time, I feel guilty because what if I could do something to make her life better? And I'm just stuck in this loop. There are so many things that I wish she would truly understand, but whenever I try to express myself, which happens like less than 1% of the time, because our interactions are basically her talking 99% of the time and me listening and me saying a few sentences here and there for 1% of the time. Whenever I try to tell my side of the story, she becomes defensive, attacks me, becomes angry, frustrated, pissed. Like, I just don't know what to do and how to communicate. I try to tell her I don't want to be in touch with her, not because I don't care about her, but simply because our relationship is so negative and I don't know what to do with it. Well, she flips it into, oh, nobody needs me because I'm a piece of trash nobody cares about, and y'all are treating me like some sort of garbage that needs to be disposed of. And it's like, I'm just trying to explain without blaming that she made a huge impact, and it had a lot of impact on me and how I perceive her. And now, I just want that distance, and I don't know if it can be repaired. She blames all family members for her bad life, and how everyone is bad in this or that way, because they have these bad traits. And I don't support her or sometimes tell her that I disagree with her. Well, it means I'm on their side defending them. Even though I'm just trying to be diplomatic, not choose sides, not go for or against anyone. I just simply try to not get involved in her delusional stuff. We try to tell her that it would be best if she would start to move more, and maybe at some point try to get a job. Well, we don't understand her. She's ill. She's afraid of neighbors and how they want bad for her, and many other reasons as to why she shouldn't do such things. She tries to teach me how to live and how life is, and I don't listen or refuse to accept her teachings by saying that at the moment I'm not looking for any advice. Well, how could anyone want to learn from such a scumbag and garbage of a person like me? It's so tiring sometimes, and I'm just in a constant state of trying to suppress myself to not say a single word because I'm on eggshells. And I'm trying to figure out this puzzle. And one of the answers is to simply cut her out or set some very clear, big boundaries. But then I feel kind of guilty and sad for her. How she would have yet another person run away from her. I don't know. I genuinely don't know what to do. What can be done in such a situation? I understand that it's a long read, but I'd really appreciate some insights, advice, support, or even if someone wouldn't mind talking me through this, because I just genuinely don't know how to process this, where to begin, and what to do. In summary, I'm stuck not knowing how to proceed with approaching my relationship with my mom. Where to go from here? More than half of my life, our relationship was drenched in tons of negative experiences. She appears to be a self-centered, victim mentality kind of person, constantly blaming others, being negative constantly, insulting a lot of other people, and nobody from our family is in contact with her anymore. Delusional, from my understanding, these are legitimate delusions, and there's no middle ground. I wish she'd understand so many things, but everything I say is basically turned and flipped against me. What do I do? Where do I go from here? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Your description of your mother sounds like borderline personality disorder, on eggshells, and constantly blaming others, and there's no middle ground are fitting descriptors. Try the subreddit Raised by Borderlines to find ideas. It's a long journey. Comment 2. Yes, of course. It is a lot. I tried not to write a novel, but it just kept coming. Yes, reach out whenever you like or need. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me. So, 2 weeks ago I decided to take a big risk with my mom. I thought maybe if I could get her to see a therapist, it might help her in our relationship. I knew it was a long shot, but I was desperate. I talked to my brother about it and he agreed it was worth a try. We both chipped in to pay for the first few sessions, hoping that if she saw some benefit, she might continue on her own. I approached her with the idea, trying to be as gentle as possible. At first, she was furious. She accused me of thinking she was crazy and said I was just like everyone else who had abandoned her. I almost gave up right then, but I managed to convince her to at least try one session. I told her it was just to talk to someone neutral, not because I thought she was crazy. She reluctantly agreed, but I could tell she was still very skeptical. The first session was a disaster. She came back even angrier, saying the therapist was just another person who didn't understand her and was out to get her. I felt like I had made things worse, but my brother and I decided to give it one more shot. We convinced her to go to a second session, promising that if she still felt the same way, we wouldn't push her anymore. Surprisingly, the second session went a bit better. She didn't come back as angry, and she even mentioned that the therapist had said a few things that made her think. I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this could actually work. Over the next week, she went to 2 more sessions. Each time, she seemed a little less hostile and a little more reflective. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, this could be the turning point we needed. But then, everything fell apart. During her 5th session, the therapist suggested that my mom might benefit from medication to help with her anxiety and depression. That was the breaking point for her. She stormed out of the session and called me, screaming that I had betrayed her and that I was trying to drug her into submission. She said she never wanted to see me or my brother again and that we were dead to her. I was devastated. I had hoped that therapy could help her see things differently, but it had only made things worse. My brother tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't listen. She blocked both of us on her phone and social media. It felt like we had lost her for good. The fallout from this has been tough. My brother and I have been trying to support each other, but it's hard. We both feel guilty for pushing her into therapy, even though we thought it was the right thing to do. I've been struggling with a lot of anger and sadness. I wanted so badly to help her, but it seems like nothing we do can make a difference. In the midst of all this, I started thinking about our childhood. My mom wasn't always like this. There were times when she was loving and supportive. I remember when I was about 8 years old, I had a really bad day at school. I came home crying, and she sat with me for hours, comforting me and telling me everything would be okay. I miss that version of her so much. I don't know what changed or when things started to go downhill, but it's heartbreaking to think about how far we've come from those days. My brother and I have also been talking a lot about our dad. He left when we were young, and I think that had a huge impact on my mom. She never really recovered from that. She always felt abandoned and betrayed, and I think that's where a lot of her negativity and distrust comes from. It's like she's been stuck in that moment of loss and betrayal for all these years, and she can't move past it. I also started to realize that a lot of my mom's behavior might be driven by fear. She's afraid of being alone, afraid of being abandoned again, and afraid of facing her own issues. It's easier for her to blame everyone else than to look at herself. I get that, but it doesn't make it any easier to deal with. Despite everything, I still love my mom. I want to help her, but I don't know how. My brother and I have talked about trying to reach out to her again in a few weeks, hoping that maybe she'll have calmed down by then. But we're both scared that it will just make things worse. For now, we're trying to focus on taking care of ourselves. We've both started seeing therapists to help us deal with the stress and guilt. It's been helpful to have someone to talk to who understands what we're going through. We're also trying to spend more time together, supporting each other and finding ways to cope. I don't know what the future holds for our relationship with our mom. I hope that someday she'll be able to see that we were just trying to help her. But for now, all we can do is take things one day at a time and hope for the best. Thanks for reading. Aita for telling my soccer-obsessed partner to get a life and stop ruining our weekends. When we started dating, we wouldn't see each other on the weekends as we lived quite far apart and were both in college at the time. So I didn't know just how much he enjoyed soccer. I knew he supported Manchester United, and I started watching a few games of the Premier League even in my own time. I did start to enjoy it, until I got to know him more and realized our weekends would be consumed by games, whether they were his own matches with his club or a really big game every single weekend. I really did try to accommodate him and find a place where he can watch it or park my car somewhere so that he can prop it up on my radio and watch it. Now, for the past year and a half, we only really have weekends together. We still live an hour apart, and I have started to resent football. It's too much, and it's not just the Premier League anymore. It's the Football Association Cup, the Champions League, hurling, under 20s, anything, football, etc. And he's always on Fantasy, a mobile game where these are all recorded and you play against friends, etc. Then he has training or a match in the middle of the weekend at a really awkward time. I love doing things with him, but I feel like we always need to plan around him and his games. I've always been scared of a relationship like this because I always wanted to share common interests and passions. My problem is I don't have any. I feel trapped and like I can't really do what I want on a weekend. I hate that too because I'd love for him to be able to share this love with me, but I have grown to just hate it so much. I was due to go on a flight on one Saturday, and he told me he won't be able to drive me because there's once again a huge game on that day. This is what broke me and made me write this post. I would love to be able to enjoy the games with him and not resent them, but I am really tired of it. I don't want to be angry with him because it's completely not a problem to be passionate about something, and he should not try to change for me. But I get so angry every time I want to do something, and I get, oh, sorry, Kissy Sex is on that day. My birthday is coming up, and he knows I don't watch football, and yet, for my 21st, there will once again be a huge game. So now what's meant to be a really important birthday will be consumed by soccer. This made me really upset. I wanted to cancel the whole thing because I really do not want to watch goddamn football on my night out. Any help, any advice is really appreciated. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. He loves soccer more than he loves you. I personally would not accept that in a long-term relationship. It's one thing to share hobbies. It's another thing when one person's hobby dominates your entire relationship. Comment 2. My advice would be to break up. This will always be an issue between you two, and the growing resentment is not going to make things better. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. So, 2 weeks ago, after I posted about my frustrations with my boyfriend's obsession with soccer, things took a turn. I decided to confront him about how I felt. I told him that I was tired of our weekends being dominated by his games, and that I wanted us to find a balance. He seemed to understand and promised to make more time for us. For a moment, I thought things might actually change. The first weekend after our talk, he surprised me by planning a day out. We went to a local art fair, something I had mentioned wanting to do for ages. It was nice, and I felt hopeful. But then, the next day, he was back to his usual routine, glued to the TV for another big game. I tried to be patient, thinking maybe it was just a one-time slip. The following weekend, my birthday arrived. I had been dreading it because I knew there was another important match scheduled. He assured me he would make it special and that we could celebrate after the game. I tried to be understanding, but it still hurt that I had to share my special day with his soccer obsession. We went out for dinner, but he kept checking his phone for updates on the match. It was like I was competing with his passion, and I was losing. After dinner, we went back to his place, and he immediately turned on the TV to catch the end of the game. I felt invisible. I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. As I walked, I thought about our relationship and whether I could continue like this. I loved him, but I was starting to feel like I was losing myself in his world. When I got back, he was still watching the game. I told him I needed some space to think about things. He looked shocked and asked if I was breaking up with him. I said I wasn't sure, but I needed time to figure out what I wanted. He apologized and promised again to change, but I had heard it before. During the week, I stayed with a friend to give myself some distance. I realized that I had been neglecting my own interests and passions because I was so focused on accommodating his. I decided to take up painting again, something I used to love, but had stopped doing. It felt good to reconnect with something that was just for me. The next weekend, I told him I wanted to spend the day alone to work on my painting. He seemed disappointed, but agreed. I spent the day lost in my art, and it was the most relaxed I had felt in a long time. That evening, he called and asked if we could talk. I agreed, and he came over. He told me he had been thinking a lot about our relationship and realized he had been taking me for granted. He said he wanted to make more of an effort to balance his passion for soccer with our relationship. I appreciated his honesty, but I was still skeptical. Actions speak louder than words, after all. Over the next few days, we tried to find a middle ground. He started limiting his soccer time, and even skipped a game to spend the day with me. It was a step in the right direction, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only temporary. I wanted to believe he could change, but I also knew how deeply ingrained his love for soccer was. One evening while we were having dinner, he mentioned that his club had an important match coming up and that he wanted me to come and watch. I hesitated, but he assured me it would mean a lot to him. I agreed, thinking maybe it could be a way for us to connect. The day of the match, I went with him to the field. I tried to be supportive, but I felt out of place. As I watched him play, I realized how much joy it brought him. It was a part of who he was, and I couldn't ask him to give it up. But I also couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness for his. After the match, we had a long talk. I told him I loved him and wanted to make it work, but I needed him to understand that I had my own needs and interests too. He listened and promised to keep working on finding a balance. It was a bittersweet moment because I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew we both wanted to try. In the days that followed, we started making small changes. We planned our weekends together, making sure to include activities we both enjoyed. He still watched his games, but he also made time for us. I continued with my painting and even started taking a class. It felt like we were finally finding a way to coexist without losing ourselves. Looking back, I realized that our relationship had been a learning experience for both of us. We had to confront our own insecurities and find a way to support each other without compromising our own identities. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.